Good evening and welcome to our monthly series, Words for Palestine. My name is Sahara Sidi and I'm a public programming coordinator at the Arab American National Museum here in Dearborn, Michigan. Before we begin tonight's program, I would like to acknowledge that the Arab American National Museum resides in the region with the highest concentration of Arab Americans in the nation. Dearborn, as well as our neighboring city, Detroit, the largest majority Black metropolis in the country, and they sit on the ancestral and colonized lands of the Anishinaabe people, known as the Three Fires Confederacy, Kickapoo, Miami, and the Wyandot. Recognizing this land, the original stewards and diasporic communities means valuing their long history and understanding our place within it. At the Arab American National Museum, we are committed to actively cultivating relationships and partnerships with the indigenous and diasporic communities in and around the museum to uplift, honor, and learn from them. The Arab American National Museum is the first and only museum of its kind in the US devoted to recording the Arab American story and its full range, richness, and diversity. In our mission to uplift and amplify Arab American voices and perspectives, we remain committed to creating spaces, virtual and in person, for us to gather, grow, grieve, and go against the grain. It is now December, and we are ushering in yet another year without resolution. And I say this all to say that words matter, and those who continue to annihilate us know this all too well, which is why we will never stop talking and writing to and about Palestine, which is why we don't shy away from indicting empire for its crimes against humanity, which is why Words for Palestine exists as a way to bridge solidarity with our families in Palestine and to raise funds for the PCRF and Palestine Legal, which is dedicated to protecting the civil and constitutional rights of anyone who speaks out for Palestinian liberation in the US. So please feel free to donate to one or both of these necessary organizations. You'll find the codes in the top corner of your screen. I'd like to thank our partners Mizna, Rawi, Palestine Rights, and Al Nadwa Free Thinking Society, as well as our artists whom you'll hear from tonight. Unfortunately, Marilyn Hacker has notified us that she is feeling unwell, so her and Deema will join us in a later iteration of Words for Palestine. Nonetheless, we still have some great acts lined up, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first reader. Maya Salameh is the author of How to Make an Algorithm in the Microwave, University of Arkansas Press 2022, which is the winner of the Etzel Adnan Poetry Prize and the Chapbook Ru. She has served as a National Student Poet, America's highest honor for youth poets, and earned fellowships and support from the President's Committee for the Arts and Humanities, the Sweeney Writers Conference, Breadloaf Environmental Writers Conference, and Stanford's Institution for Diversity in the Arts. Her poems appear in Poetry, The Rumpus, The Offing, Muzzle, Agni, Mizna, and the LA Times, among others. She can be found at MAYASLMH or mayasalameh.com. Please welcome Maya to the stage.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here and reading with such talented poets tonight. I'm grateful to the museum for providing a space with a focus and constant eye towards Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon in this time of genocide. Before I read some of my pieces, I wanted to read a Fadi Joudah piece, to which I'm happy to share the link. It's titled Ellipsis, or like 3 dots. Still they ask in podcast and electronic ink, how are you doing? And they keep you in their hearts, pump you to their minds, circulate you unimagined. Take all the space you need, they say. Empathy loves the damaged. You offer no solutions, only clarity they don't believe. Only they get to tell the future what to be. Then they pump you into their viscera and feel you bilious, ineffable, cast iron butterfly. Their questions like a shovel that doesn't know what earth is, but digging anyway. They hope you would say, I am multi-generational and can fracture natural bonds in my DNA. For this, they can sell to a tycoon press, a Carnegie of thought dissemination. And your answer comes, things are a seasickness and no land in sight. Your peeping is no witness. With eternal gratitude to Fadi Joudah for his work, and I encourage everyone to check out his new book as well. So I'll get into my pieces now. The first piece I have for you all is God and Language Make Grammar in a Backseat. The $7 sunflowers we bought after arguing over the grocery cart. My name, the last piece of silver on my neck. We debate new cities. Montreal, Ann Arbor, Los Angeles, Berlin. We measure our shiny blue passports against our marked bodies. I dissect my Spanish, English, the dusk-skinned French, our tongues a constellation on the duvet. My country's fables say I am devoted. It's July and the tile stinks of Lysol. July installed at the airport and my country's fables say I am not endangered. July and psychology banned in Florida. I pluck extensively at my ankles, spread my legs and inspect for practice. It's still July and we stop for strawberry ice cream, our blood partitioned in the trees. This next piece is called Cognates for Brielle. I ask you what time for lunch, and you smile like a word for the end of August. The stanza of our slacks imprinted on the desk. I told your mother I'd make you salmon, and I did. Of all my prayers, you are my favorite. You promised your palm into my stomach. A month ago, we were sat in the middle of a park, advocating for our hearts, and it was 3 p.m., and your mouth was in the shape of clouds. It's November now, and the noun under the sink is screaming again, but we couldn't care less, your feet planted shoulder width between my ankles. Your hands leave zinnias on my legs, and we're learning control is the opposite of love. I want to wait on you to get home. I want to match on Halloween. Sonnet for my most current assassin, after Terence Hayes. I measure my cycle in wide teal stars. In the app, my blood is round, allotted. I siphon long like the ribbons of cars driving from work. Tuesday, I trace spotted horizon with my throat. On TikTok, girls loyally estimate their faces, and I'm so efficient. Rhythm hung in pearls. My telomeres stretch like music, kissed lashes, my appraised nose. Terror was my best sibling growing up. I'm safer as a myth than a woman. My mole arrows cover my hands in apricot paste. Look at this pattern. I'm trying to impersonate someone who can breathe. Look at this pattern. My clots are violent. My fear is green. This next piece is called Archive Spilled on Patio. We are more than daughters. Our mothers more than prayers to tell ourselves at night. One of my grandmothers was a coiffeuse. Sometimes she visits me in the shower, compels me to pull at my curls with the care of a geometrician, i.e. her love is thorough. She scrubs my feet with pumice stone, ensures my back is lotioned after showering, i.e. cosmology. In the nursing home, Teta spits the bedspread by 9 at the latest, and they store her name in a Tupperware in a shared fridge in a quiet neighborhood. I smear tobacco, mutilate the cannon with my mouth. In one photo, Esperanza in her pink bandana, floating boleros across the kitchen. I can see her step off the bus of the hours, let her hair tint true mahogany, hum with all her teeth. I like to think that second is a pool, a bloom that didn't demand anything. In another photo, she's in the yard barefoot, holding a lit cigarette and berating somebody. It is my favorite photo. This next piece is called How to Braid an Artery. I laugh with the velocity of pigskin, discuss God with boys I will never see again. We toss languages around the table like we remember them, hull sunflowers with our eyes. An event is just a set of things. A Sunday ago, the street spills over our tired necks. My brother scratches his script into tree stomach. My body preceded me by 3 centuries at least. The city sculpts a screenplay out of us. Sidewalk promises summers we might not survive to drink. Aleppo's back hums when she sits down. I remember the city like a demarcation or a divot in coffee. But it was never about hagiography. It was about my tombstone and writing something different on it. A year ago, I kept canisters of similes in my basement. I watch boys become men every night. I eat the music that makes me old again. My brother recites the pavement with me, too busy to notice the varicose veins in the asphalt. Tell me how Aleppo taught me yardage. Listen to me stretch, eat. I braid the sameness with which we bleed, arrange the tolls on my wall like linebackers. Tell me how I gurgle these letters, the dead's grammar, the dead. This piece is called Sonata, with an epigraph that goes like this. I live near a forest with deer. In January, I saw a wolf chasing a deer while driving. Wolves are associated with Pisces, Virgo's deer. The deer called the cops on the wolf. From the 60th email I received from my stalker. And the piece is called Sonata. In my freshman year, when I am still a girl, I meet a quiet boy in my dorm. We say hellos in passing in the dining hall. He was 2 years older, maybe. A year after my graduation, I get a private message on Twitter. In a month, 600 pages of devotionals about me, of me, to me. I visit the police station 7 times in 1 year. I visit them more than the dentist. They are as helpful as I expect, so I keep his emails in a folder. Occasionally, I skim them to make sure he isn't feeling violent. I live just south of night, rife with clouds, long helixed hair, inherited suspicion of pills, biblical as my land. August 28th, and I wake up to another email. I eat a healthy dinner. I wish to be amphibian. The officer says there is not a specific enough intent to kill. I know I've been reading pretty somber poems tonight. It's a pretty somber time. But I'm gonna close this out with maybe 2 kind of lighter poems. This first piece is called Me and the Jinn in Your Laptop Had to Talk About You. My mother always wore her blouses with the tags tucked in. I tell the Jinn I loved you like that, scared to even recite the conditional. It's Marshall's on Grossmont, and he brings me the tool that circles my waist like calligraphy. I tell the Jinn I cannot stop buying clothes too small for me, that you look at me like holy books. I tell him I wish our time lingered like noon after Mass. The Jinn offers me parsley and vanilla extract to summon your real name, and Mama leaves me voicemails asking where I've disappeared. Her voice is a hymn haunting all the congregation's shirts. The Jinn in your house has seen my eyes full of furniture for you, the acres of velvet. It bothers me we have so many bones. You wear all 200 as if they are each necessary. I want that certainty. I want to be standing again, halfway sighted, in your room.
Thank you so much, Maya. Our next reader will be Mosab Hamid, who is a multidisciplinary artist from Brooklyn, New York. Their work has been recognized by Wesleyan University, the National Young Arts Foundation, and the Gordon Parks Foundation, among others. Inspired by a world wrought with palpable contradiction and conflict, Mosab's written work seeks to find solace, respite, release, and even joy in the mess. Please join me in welcoming Mosab.
Thank you so much, Sahara, for having me. I'm so honored to be a part of this wonderful coalition, and the work that y'all are doing is amazing, and I'm honored to be a part of it. So, in thinking through what I wanted to share with you all today, I've come ready with a collection of different poems, both original and not. Um, and I want to start out with one of my favorite poems, literally ever, and it's from this book called The January Children by Safia El Hilo. And this poem, shout out to her, is called Asmarani Makes Prayer. Verily, everything that is lost will be given a name and will not come back, but will live forever. And verily, a border-shaped wound will be licked clean by songs naming the brown girl in particular. Verily, she will not heal, but verily, the ghost will not leave her alone. Verily, when asked how she got her name, if telling the truth, she will say, "A woman died, and everything wants a home." The next poem I want to read is an original. It's called We Used to Have Names, and it's after No Name or Fatima Warner. My friend the prophet, peace be upon us both. We used to have names you could chew for hours. Tough, meaty syllables you couldn't swallow whole. We used to have names swathed in thick syrup, like baklava, ubiquitous, and better homemade. Now, our names are a tune we hum because we never remember the words, a lyric as far gone as us, or the language that we should know. My name was right to left, a sunrise, or a sunset, depending on where you are and what you are seeking to burn. I almost died in utero. The naming was a relief. The name was a prophecy. I used to have a name that sounded like victory. It has since begun to sound like loss. Old friend, do you even remember? You used to have a name too. It crackled like mosque speakers on Friday evenings in Fort Greene. It boomed like the adhan, croaked with passion in the imam's throat. It washed over us like the heaviest rainfall, and we welcomed the flood out of thirst. One Ramadan, I forgot your name. Maybe it was the hunger. Perhaps it was the war. Back someplace my spirit once called home like scratch-off phone cards, ear pressed to the receiver like a conch. In the static hiss, I heard your name. It was a raging river. Over the phone, my brother told me he'd found a body in the drinking well and tasted his tears. Your name was the second to leave his lips, after God. Maybe he thought it was you, who could have saved us, or had forsaken him. I used to have nicknames that reeked of laziness or cruelty. As a child, they'd call me Mosab bin Laden. They'd call me Musab and graze my ego. I used to have a name that sounded like victory. It now sounds like a rim shot, like a new cuss word. It has since become a solitary syllable, a lost child at the mall, waiting for her mother where she was left. I hear no and turn around. I answer to whatever. But I used to have a name before, once. It belonged to a man with an affinity for irony. Hassan Yusuf denounced Islam as a religion of war, fled to the US for asylum of all places, and converted to Christianity of all faiths. And yet, of all names, his was that of your best Sahabi, my friend. Islam's first ambassador. He was said to be so dazzling the sight could burn your eyes like the sun. He was said to bear a striking resemblance to you, my friend. One night, he gave himself for his sahib. He answered to your name, knowing the cost. The enemy severed his hands in place of yours, right, then left, like a waddu, or a sunset, or a language that you should know. He carried the sickle moon in the raw stumps of his arms, as your name rushed red from his body like the tide. What other man do you know who played a martyr to a prophet? They could not find a casket large enough. They shrouded a white sheet over his body and laid idkhir over his feet, right then left, like how Mama made me read the verse about my namesake. I forgot my name. I took it off for just 1 second, and now I can't find it anywhere. I am not deserving of this legacy. I am not desiring of this burden. My friend, the prophet, we used to have names that smelled like black tea with cloves and cinnamon, freshly slaughtered sacrifices and brown bodies steeping in the Nile. But that was before the revolution furrowed our thick brows and made us so familiar with loss, made loss a family of its own, and gave it a name like ours. We lost the war on terror with ourselves. There is a tune in the place where we once stood, faint, barely escaping your ear right at the tip of your tongue. If only I could remember my name. All right. The next poem that I want to read is from this book, which I think was recently released, Bluff by Denez Smith. Beautiful book. Shout out to Denez as well. And this poem is called Love Poem. During the doomed interludes between hope, I try to remember children exist. In the bled event of the present tense, I remember these men were children. Should I worship tomorrow if tomorrow is the one who turns children into patriots? Maybe God's love is everything ends. Maybe time is our sentence. Maybe time is how he hates. Love me now. Tomorrow has no face. The children are on their way to kill us, and we must feed the children. The next poem is, again, from the January Children. I just love this collection of poems in general. And this one is called The Part I Keep Forgetting. Sudan is crackling around the edges, is a singed bit of paper, is cracked by a river in two, is new border, fresh wound soldiers standing in the street. Sudan was always an invented country. Sudan is grainy photographs, and Dalia's been arrested, and Yusuf's been arrested. Sudan broke my mother's heart. I came from a Sudan that had gardens and magnolia flowers. Now I'm not from anywhere. Cut open my uncle's back, 40 lashes. I haven't been able to wear silk since. But the part I keep forgetting is that I am at the Jazz Museum in Harlem, and I'm hearing the stories secondhand, and I'm hearing the stories in English, on television, and I am spared the smell. I am cutting pomegranates in my pretty kitchen, and my fingers are sweet red. Okay, the next poem I want to read is an original, and it's called Auto Eulogy of a Guava Tree. 1. Should this revolution not be fruitful, thank God. Should I be severed at the trunk tonight, or spotted in a pile of driftwood rolling in the river tomorrow, do not fish my remains from where they lay. Do not bury me beneath this infertile soil, barren and wafting a sick metallic breeze. Despite what they tell you, I will not come back. There is nothing this dirt can offer me any more. Is it the scent of blood that I resent? Or does the iron stench harken back to the tools used to mine it from our bodies like the oil? Is the red that I see a bleeding or a fury? 2. Do not fear the path that I've chosen. I will find my way back to the water. Until then, do not plug your ears to the wails of my mother. Let the sound flush the wax from your ears. Hear then what the world has become, a collection of tides crashing against sullen shores, like the brown river just west of my Haboba's home. The Hurons take to the sky when Mama's voice echoes its way to me. I'm not sorry the Nile rose with me. I'm not sorry that my spirit became the flooding. Call this new body irrigation and drink and drown. I'm not sorry I found more fertile soil in Haboba's backyard. A guava tree sprouts tall there. This is where I will be, watching, blooming, and eating the sun like I was always meant to. Okay. The next poem I'd like to read is called Haboba. My Haboba was like Moses, She hated airplanes, so she carved a path in the sea and walked to the hospital when I was born. Brooklyn made her feet itch. This country cut and calloused them, but she picked the scabs and stayed. I was her favorite of the grandchildren for whom she feared Sudan would be nothing but a bedtime story. And Sudan wasn't even home, at first. She herself yearned to return to her beloved Ethiopia. She had followed a man to the so-called land of the blacks, only to watch her plum-dark skin pruning under the heat of glares from his fairer brides, who were always in his favor. Whispered from the ridged mouths of cowrie shells, Haboba heard histories and futures. Still, her mother passed, and no one told her. Haboba's husband held her grief tight in his fist, raised it to her sister's neck, and demanded silence for years. He feared her sight, knew that if he allowed her to grieve her mother, she would grieve her mother's land and carve a path back there. Stripped of her own, the idea of calling both sides of a border home was alien. It only been since 1994 that her government recognized dual citizenship. But Haboba knew Tunis well, one foot itching in this realm and the other elsewhere. The shells must have warned her that her daughter had similar taste in men. The bastards were coming. The Amrikis were inevitable. So she came, stayed, and loved for as long as she could before her eyes began carving again. Some years ago, my mama's eyes began carving too. Something whispered that it was time to go home. The night before the flight, we got the call. All mama's mouth could muster was, "Why? Why didn't you wait for me?" Some weeks ago, my Haboba's home in Sudan was raided and burned to the ground. For the first time, we were relieved that it was empty. Although I do wish they were both still standing. Her there, right there, in the sun-soaked kitchen, dodging ants aiming to nibble at our toes, head bobbing to the never-ending clang and hiss. Maybe then Haboba would pour me a cup of tea, pick me a guava from the tree in her backyard, and feed me a lamb she'd offered to Allah in exchange for holding me to the bed as I sleep so I do not dream in English, so my body does not crave the itch of Brooklyn on my toes. A Haboba is not a pen pal, is not WhatsApp notifications, is not grandma. A Haboba is shoulder-shaking laughter when my Arabic sounds more Rosetta Stone than Great Pyramid. A Haboba is broken English, and broken bread, and broken visas. A Haboba is not afraid of America, but jumps at the sound of windows slammed and sirens past midnight. A Haboba will not apply for citizenship because she hates America. It is too cold and ugly and dangerous and smelly and cold and far. A Haboba will argue with Mama, try to warn her. Home is the one recipe she could never teach, and the shells see only sorrow to come. A Haboba knows to begin gathering her things when she tells her daughter that the man and the country she has chosen will bring an early death, and her daughter says she knows. A Haboba knows to leave when the child no longer cries at the sound of horns honking in traffic or planes that fly too low, and the gold honey in the child's eyes has darkened to a dull brown maple. A Haboba tucks a cowrie shell underneath the child's pillow, plants a warm kiss on her cheek, and massages her perfume behind the child's ears, gently rubs the child's hair for Asl to smell on the journey home, parts the sea once more from the highest pillar of the Brooklyn Bridge, and lets the sand scratch what's left of America from the soles of her feet. A Haboba will not shed a single tear until she hears the bleating of a newborn baby goat from underneath the guava tree. Gonna take a sip of water real quick. Okay. I have one more poem to share, and it is not my own. Uh, Coming right on back to the El Hilo. And this poem is called, sorry, Self-Portrait with Yellow Dress. And sometimes we do not die. We are born to a body dressed in black and do not wear it to a funeral. We live forever. Our mouths open and a song falls out thick with a saxophone syrup, and all our dead in the ground make the land ours, and all our missing fathers make us everything's child. Today I am not dressed for a funeral. I wear the yellow dress and laugh with all my teeth, and my lost ones are not lost to me. They live in the wind that gathers my skirt. Today, this is my country. I say their names, and all the holes left behind, shaped like black girls and black boys, are lit up by hundreds of faraway stars. Today, I woke up and was not dead. And tomorrow might be different, but tomorrow does not yet exist. So I hold my mother's hand and kiss the brown valley between each knuckle. My brother opens his mouth to laugh, and the light pours in through the gap in his teeth. I press my body to a man that I find beautiful and sway, to a song that knows us. I live forever with my feet in my grandmother's lap. I live forever by the water, with the sun spilled over me. Remember me this way, and when they come for me, play the song that I love into the space I leave behind. Thank you again so much for this opportunity to share. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the wonderful poets and writers that are going to share as well, and much love.
Thank you so much, friend. Just a just a reminder, please make use of these QR codes on the left-hand side of your screen. We really greatly appreciate any donations that you can make. And in lieu of Marilyn Hacker's sudden illness, I'll be reading just a few poems to kind of fill the space before we transition to our final reader for the night. So I'll start off with just some rough drafts. I tried my hand at my first love poem, thinking about this fun fact of, not fun fact, but fun phenomenon that isn't fun at all, of women getting off of hormonal birth control and realizing that they actually don't like their boyfriends. And so I was just like, oh, how interesting is this? So without any more, this is On Forever. I need a love that will outlast PFAS and trauma. I need that kind of love that overrides thought patterns and bad habits. Need a love so good my children can inherit this feeling of goodness. I need my babies to feel entitled to whatever tenderness might be left in this world. Oh, to be indebted with only the task of paying it forward. I want to promise someone forever and mean it. Sadly, forever is only ever as long as I am in my right mind, in my right body, well within my right to choose a love like this. And my second poem is a fake sonnet. By fake sonnet, I mean it's not actually 14 lines. And this is called Summer 16 Faux Sonnet. We never intended to play blackjack or smoke black and milds for that matter. Still, we knew the rules, learned them just as we learned the consequences for breaking them. Nostalgic for youth, even with all that collagen. And we tried out curse words on the court in questionable combinations after a concrete cliff twisted an ankle or when the ball bounced off the double rim. And we knew the first to 21 wins, every man for himself, which is to say, I'll drive home the minute I smell bullshit at a party we know we shouldn't even go to, and let the Marlboro statue loom in my rear view on 95. And that summer was the hottest on record, homicide and Fahrenheit alike. And I swear the sun burned slow like cigarellos lit, then sucked to ash in the still air of Will's sedan. That was the year we learned D'Angelo's shit, damn, motherfucker, and what it meant to feel pregnant with twins, guilt and ghost. Coming to know what the hell our mother must have heard, a funeral sermon and falsetto. That was the year that never ended, where friends stayed 15 forever and no one got to 21, and the sidewalks were littered with vigils. That was the year Jordan's uncle bought us cognac so we could grieve like adults. Pour one out, he said, and then take a shot to the head. And the last poem I'll read is in Ars Poetica, however you pronounce that word. I can't help it. I want to weld all this rage into a weapon I can wield. God forbid we use the fire to warm them. And forgive us for every chicken soup for the soul ass poem we pimped out for prize money. Goddamn 1098 T 1099. Goddamn these blessings that aren't blessings at all. Goddamn the rich bitch writing us off. And our next reader will be Lena Mabsutina, who is the author of Emrikia, an Arab American Book Award winner, a finalist for the Louise Merriweather First Book Prize, and one of Forward's 4 phenomenal debut novels. Her work has appeared in Cocoon, A Gathering Together, and The Offing, among others, and she has been nominated for 2 Pushcart Prizes. So welcome, Lena, to the stage.
Hi, thank you, Sahara. And thank you to the Arab American National Museum for inviting me and also just for holding events like this every month. And to Maya and Mosab for your incredible readings too. So I'll just be reading an excerpt from my second novel, which is in progress. So this novel is called The Beloved Bequest. And just to give some context for this, the story is based on a folktale, a Palestinian folktale about a pot named Tunjer that comes to life and becomes the daughter of a single woman named Zada. And so in my retelling, it's set in the fictional Palestinian town of Beit Tahwil. And this is ruled by an evil emperor who has like a governor who is sort of his representative in the town. And at this point, Tunjer, so the talking pot, she's been convicted of sedition by the occupying governor, and her mother, Zada, believes that she's been executed at this point. And Zada herself is also banished from the town by that governor because he believes that sending her out on her own will be a slower and more torturous path to death. But we'll see that this is not the case. Zada reached Jerusalem, enticed by the smell of food coming from the souk. She had no money, but she traded one of the thobes in her bag for manaish and olives. Abu Mansour, the vendor who sold her the food, asked, "Where have you come from, Amti?" She noticed the pity in his eyes and looked down at her dirty thobe and touched the dust on her hijab. "A town up in the hills," she said. He nodded. "My wife can prepare a bed for you, and my mother is great company." She flushed at the offer of charity, but a bath and a bed tempted her. "I have more thobes I can sell you," she said. But Abu Mansour dismissed that idea, waving it away like a fly, and his son escorted Zada to their home. It was not far from the souk, but when she got off her donkey and greeted Abu Mansour's relatives, she was dizzy with exhaustion. Sid Lubna, Abu Mansour's mother, led her to the washroom, and the stone walls and the wooden basin reminded her of the home that she had not seen in so long that she fell asleep right there, sitting up with her head nestled in a corner. In Jerusalem, Zada was less of an oddity. She lived with a family, even if it was not her own, and there were too many people in the city for anyone except one's most immediate neighbors to take an interest in where she came from and what brought her here. And soon everyone forgot that Zada had not always lived in this house. Abu Mansour's daughters were the most fascinated with their guest, and it amazed them to see how quickly Zada threaded her needle through cloth. "Umpty, please make me a pretty dress," one of them begged her. She made a small one and embroidered geometric olive trees encased by blue thread as she envisioned both the sea and her home Beit Tahwil. Everyone was impressed and complimented her unusual design, and the girl wore her gift proudly throughout the city. After that, their neighbors came by often to request more pieces from Zada, and she only asked for the materials but accepted no payment. Though she was almost constantly at work, her fingers never cramped or shook from the effort. One evening, said Lubna insisted Zada take a break. "The work will be waiting for you tomorrow," she said. Zada nodded. "Yes, but it keeps my mind and eyes sharp." Sid Lubna put her hand on Zada's shoulder. "And it stops you from dwelling on something that you'd rather not face," Sid Lubna said. Zada looked back down and continued her needlework. "Do you have children?" Sid Lubna asked. "Not anymore." Zada was certain that the tranquility and acceptance that she had in the house and among the nearby women would be shattered if they knew that she had a pot daughter who had been executed by one of the emperor's governors. Sid Lubna apologized for Zada's loss, but she did not question her about it further until a few weeks later when they were hanging laundry on the clothesline. Sid Lubna spoke of her eldest son's death years ago and the devastation that still lingered in her heart, hoping that their shared grief would make the other woman more forthcoming about her own. "What happened to your children?" she asked as she wrung the water out of a thobe and then handed it off to Zada. "I had only one daughter, and she died," Zada said. "Surely the rest of your family must have comforted you in your time of grief," Sid Lubna inquired. Zada sighed and looked in the bucket of soapy water. "The rest of my family was dead or exiled," Zada said. "And what about your neighbors?" Sid Lubna asked. Zara put her fists on her heart and closed her eyes. "They are the ones who sent her to her death." Sid Lubna gasped and embraced Zara tightly. What a terrible thing to do. How old was she? "Very young," Zara answered. "She was a unique girl, and many people loved her, but then..." Tears spilled from her eyes as her throat constricted. She could not say more, but her body returned to the time when the governor snatched her daughter from her arms. She heard the crowd jeering and felt the jagged rocks scraping against her skin as she fell. Sid Lubna did not mention their guest's heartbreak to anyone else, but she kept on insisting that Zada eat more food during dinner and drink more tea after, and it comforted Zada to fill her belly. She packed her bag and quietly left that night without saying a word to the family who had taken her in. The glowing stars, the only guide to her next destination. "I married my husband years after his first wife died, and his greedy grown sons never warmed to me," Zada said. "When he died, they threatened to kill me so that they would receive their full inheritance, and I had to flee because none of my family came to my aid." Her hosts, the Suleiman family who had given her food and shelter for the past 3 days, were absorbed in Zada's story at the dinner table and pitied the poor woman. One of the children even stood up and put her arms around Zada's neck and gave her a kiss. She had been traveling for weeks, inching closer to Palestine's coast. The people in the towns and villages she passed through welcomed her, offering food and a place to stay. Once she was fed and rested, her host always asked her questions about how a lone old woman came to be in such a state and how she managed to survive. This curiosity would have made her tense and anxious in the past, but she was emboldened to tell her own tales now that she was among strangers. She said that the governor of her tiny village had murdered all her relatives to marry one of her daughters, or that she had escaped kidnappers who held her until her ailing husband would pay a ransom for her return. This was the first time she told the story of the avaricious stepsons, the details coming to her as she spoke. Zada accepted the condolences and pity from the audience and wondered if they believed her. She knew that some of her previous hosts regarded her as a supernatural being, a jinniya perhaps, who came to test their faith and character by seeing how they would treat a humble stranger. She overheard one man tell his wife, "There is no way a human woman could make it so long alone without a home. She is not of this world." Their attention made Zara feel closer to her daughter without having the pangs of grief that came when she remembered the details of her life. And it was exhilarating to escape herself and her real tragedies. Aside from the last year, she had spent her whole life surrounded by people who knew almost all her business, but nothing about who she was. She never stayed in one place for more than a few days, so she was not concerned about creating consistent lies or having a courageous listener offer to help solve her fictitious problems. She kept herself from becoming accustomed to the personalities and routines of her host. She did not want to get used to which discussions a family would have during their breakfast and dinner, or the punishment a mother would give a misbehaving child. She wanted each place to feel novel and unknown because the weight of attachment was too much for her to carry. The unfamiliar settings were her only solace in this aimless trek, and so she packed her belongings and left the Suleiman house at dawn the following day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lena.
Thank you.
And then I just wanted to welcome the remaining authors on screen. I know Mosab has somewhere to be at 8. So no worries at all, Mosab. We will miss you dearly. But if you want to stay on for the 8 minutes or whatever, I know they're closing up shop on your end, so no worries. Okay. But I wanted to pose a question for our readers tonight that also brings in Nikki Giovanni's spirit in the room, beginning with a reading from For Sandra, in which Nikki Giovanni pens, "I wanted to write a poem that rhymes, but revolution doesn't lend itself to beat bopping. Then my neighbor, who thinks I hate, asked, 'Do you ever write tree poems?' I like trees, so I thought, I'll write a beautiful green tree poem. Peeked from my window to check the image, noticed that the schoolyard was covered with asphalt. No green, no trees grow in Manhattan. Then, well, I thought, the sky, I'll do a big blue sky poem, but all the clouds have winged low since no Dick was elected. So I thought again, and it occurred to me, maybe I shouldn't write at all, but clean my gun and check my kerosene supply. Perhaps these are not poetic times at all." And so I'm sure the news of her passing, as it was announced earlier this week, was a reminder of the teachings and contributions to our fight for liberation and for joy. And perhaps these aren't poetic times at all, much less polite ones, but I really wanted to hear from readers here. What is poetry doing for you in this moment as a writer or a reader? Perhaps you can kind of give readers, as well as whoever watches this after the fact, some insight into a reading list. I know there's some poetry that seems to be 2D and flat, but certainly there are others that jump off the page and do more than we typically ask of poetry. So I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any thoughts on the matter.
Before I have to dip out, I was just tuning in. I think I have a couple more minutes before they literally kick me out. So I just wanted to answer this question real quick. But yes, for me, I feel like my position as a poet has been sort of in flux right now because I haven't been feeling like I have much to say. And so for me, a lot of the value of poetry currently is coming from consumption, which I mean, even that word is sort of charged, but you know what I mean. And for me in particular, the reason why I wanted to share so many Safia poems tonight is because there's a quality of that of her poetry in particular, but of poetry that does the kind of labor that I think we're aiming to do, that really galvanizes people to lean into the things that they aren't sure of, right? Or lean into the fact that there is there's no right collection of words to say, and getting messy with it, and allowing that to be okay, especially given the fact that a lot of us are grappling with identities that are inherently messy. And I'll leave it at that. But I want to say thank you again for having me, and have a beautiful night, everyone.
Bye, Mom. Maya, you looked like you had something to say, or no?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I want to mirror what Mosab said. I adore Sophia's work, especially the January Children. I also recommend her novel and verse, Bright Red Fruit. I guess I feel similarly to Mosab in that lately words seem brittle, and so I've turned most often lately to the works of Palestinian and other Arab poets writing from or about the homeland. I recently finished Fadi Judah's amazing new collection. I don't know if he prefers people call it ellipses or three dots or dot dot dot, but I highly recommend it. Um, I have also just finished not a poetry book, but it's called Understanding Incarceration, Electronic Monitoring the Surveillance State and the Future of Mass Incarceration by James Kilgore. I think it's also important to supplement our reading of poetry with reading of theory. And I guess I've been thinking a lot about the ways that like military surveillance and the gaze of the state are being, practiced, experimented, and perfected in Gaza, and then exported right back here to America as well. But yeah, I think reading poetry offers me a place to rest and also a place to regather my energies and a place to hope, and I think that's really important.
So like as far as I guess like my response, like I'll kind of make it just more about like reading in general. So recently, like we had Read Palestine Week, so the whole week devoted to reading different types of stuff about Palestine, and I think that like I mean I was asked also like what how is reading an act of solidarity, and I think just the recognition of showing that Palestinian history, Palestinian creative works, that those are worthy of being seen, and also promoting them so that people know something um, beyond just I guess what like is put out in mainstream media, and also something that goes beyond just like our suffering as well that we see a lot on social media.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, I love the recommendation you gave. You said it was e-carceration.
Yeah, it's called Understanding Incarceration by James Kilgore.
So yeah, and I was even thinking of, the saying of like poets turned novelists. The sentences just kind of they're a lot more tastier, or you can kind of like tell when a fiction writer has these like poetic sensibilities that like permeate and texture the language. I've been thinking about theory that I found, and I'm like, this is way too poetic. And then you look into their bio, and lo and behold, um, I was thinking a lot about Wang's book, Carceral Capitalism, that kind of came out a while back. But it even like features poetry in it as well, even though it is this very laborious like effort of trying to chronicle carceral capitalism as it has, exponentially developed in this country. So yeah, I agree. There is something about reading poetry as theory in and of itself, and then also reminding ourselves to still satiate that quest for knowledge, and educating ourselves on, yeah, the more nuanced dynamics of this pervasive beast that we fight together. I also was wondering, while we still have a couple minutes left, did any of you guys want to read a Nikki Giovanni poem? Were there some that were, maybe coming across your feed, or that you had been hit with in light of the announcement that you would like to share at this time?
I actually have one. Let me just find it in my phone really quickly. I don't think it's titled. It came across my Instagram feed. It's a very quick one, but it said, "So I thought again, and it occurred to me, maybe I shouldn't write at all, but clean my gun and check my kerosene supply. Perhaps these are not poetic times at all." I think it's very apt for the moment.
Yeah, no, I love that piece. Lena, did you have any poems in mind? Or?
Yeah, I guess I'm actually kind of out of it because I didn't hear that she had passed earlier this week. So I don't have anything like right now to read, but I have read her stuff in the past.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, I'm so sorry that this is where you had to find out. I'm sorry. Well, without further ado, I think we could close it out at 8 o'clock. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Really, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. And shout out to the Arab American National Museum. Thanks for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.